I'm Kurt Barling, Professor of Journalism at Middlesex University. Most people will be familiar with that because we used to have branches, of course, at Trent Park in Enfield and other parts of this part of London. I've been living in Palmer's Green most of my adult life, although there was a brief interlude for about 15 years where I decided to travel elsewhere across London and around the world before coming back home. So my early memories of Palmer's Green are of being at St John's Nursery, which is on the corner of Hedge Lane and Bourne Hill. And I was very young, obviously, there. It was not such a mixed community then. Essentially, it was a very white Palmer's Green. And my main memory from there is having my fingers crushed in an accident when trestle tables, toppled on top of me and a friend, Nicholas Upton. I think he still lives in Palmer's Green, actually. They saved his sight, and they didn't quite save my finger, but they at least patched it up. Cool. So in 1966, I moved to Hazelwood School, and I have lots of variable memories of Hazelwood School. Again, it wasn't a very mixed school. There were two black children there. I was one of them. Tunda, actually, was the name of the other black student from Nigeria. She came and visited me when I was in my 30s, actually. She'd gone back to Nigeria, and it was quite an emotional reunion. But Hazelwood in those days was a very different layout than the school we know now. The school aspired me to go to Latimer, but my mother had been a grammar school girl in Wood Green at Trinity, and she rather loathed the whole idea of a grammar education, and so she was dead against me going to Latimer. But Hazelwood was at times a friendly school, but it could also be a pretty brutal place in the playground when you're a young black kid. Some children in the 70s and late 60s, early 70s took against you. 1968, we all remember Enoch Powell and Enoch Powell's speech. That was a rather rocky time for children of colour, and particularly children in places like Hazelwood School, because the other children in the playground would make a point of saying, well, you know, Mr. Enoch says you shouldn't be here. Bang, in the stomach. I can remember my first encounter with violence was in the Hazelwood playground when two lads decided to punch me out in the stomach, and actually from that day on I reckoned that if I was going to get punched in the stomach, I needed to toughen myself up. So I toughened myself up, became a serious athlete at that point, you know, about age 7, thinking if I'm going to get punched, I'm going to make sure I can resist it. But it wasn't all bad news at Hazelwood. I made some special friends there. One friend I'm still friends with, who became a world-renowned drummer, Graham Ward. He played with Tom Jones, was Tom Jones' drummer. We played together in the National Youth Jazz Orchestra in our teens, but our friendship was founded in Hazelwood. Another friend, Marius Kaparius, who still lives in Palmer's Green. Occasionally I bump into him in the Depali restaurant, and he remembers me and my parents from old. So those friendships were very firm friendships. The interesting thing about Marius, of course, was that he was one of a growing community of Greek Cypriots in Palmer's Green up until about 1973, 74, with the crisis in Cyprus. There were a few Greek Cypriots here, but suddenly there were many Greek Cypriots here, and that changed the character of Palmer's Green. In fact, it made Palmer's Green a much more mixed place. So my teenage years were very much reflecting that emerging plurality in Palmer's Green. People often forget, because we've become so accustomed to it in Palmer's Green now, that back in those days, even in the 1960s, there were no motor cars. We used to play football across the road. I live in Grovelands Road now. I was raised on the corner of Grovelands Road and Fox Lane. We used to play football across the road for hours on end. We might get one car that passed, and the car would stop for you and wait for you to score your goal, and then you'd let the car go. You can't imagine that now when they're racing down at 45 miles an hour. And so the car changed Palmer's Green an awful lot. Of course, I'm of that generation who remembers all those old stores in Palmer's Green, Evans and Davies, Grout's on the corner of Devonshire Road, Sainsbury's with the sloping floor, Tesco's on the other side of the road, even the cinemas, where there's now, I think, a cooperative store. Used to be Waitrose until recently. And where, of course, Palmer's Green in those days was still a place where the well-heeled often live. So one very good example is the Westlake family, who lived here on Grovelands Road, and they owned several shops. They owned the hardware store, they owned the greengrocers and various other things. I think they still own and take rent from some of the properties here, but they were a family who were very much embedded in Palmer's Green. Now a lot of those kind of shop owners might live up in Winchmore Hill or Hadley Wood, I guess. In fact, Mrs. Westlake was a very fearsome lady. In fact, at the age of around about 4, she heard me use the F word on Grovelands Road and reported me to my mother, who promptly said, I have no idea where he got that language from. But obviously I'd got it from her. But nevertheless, I was still punished duly in order that Mrs. Westlake was satisfied that the correct action had been taken. Of course, Palmer's Green still had the running track in Broomfield Park, the running track on which I competed as a teenager, got through the District Trials, went to the county championships over at Hendon and became a county champion as a hurdler. It also, I have memories of the Cubs that I used to go to. I think I kind of did about a year as a scout, but the Cubs, we used to do all sorts of things. You know, Bob a Job was what we were doing every year. Bob a Job, you know, terrorise people all along Lakes Estate. It wasn't called the Lakes Estate in those days, of course, to do Bob a Jobs for them. I was also a paper boy and a milk boy. So my patch as a paper boy was Conway Road. So I did that for about 10 years, up at 6:30 in the morning, delivering papers. And papers got heavier and heavier by the time I was 18, to the point where you could barely walk up the road to deliver the papers. I was also a milk boy for about 6 years, starting at the very top of Alderman's Hill and then working our way all the way down the Lakes Estate to Devonshire Road, stopping in the Greasy Spoon on Devonshire Road and always having a nice slap-up, very unhealthy meal in the mornings. That was part of the deal. I got paid £2.50, I think, for the round, but I also got a free meal at breakfast time. And then we stopped in the pub at the Fox. The milkman was very keen to stop in the pub at the Fox, and I would get some kind of compensation for being in the Fox, probably half a shandy or something. So Palmer's Green has lots of these memories of being an industrious youngster trying to earn some money, sport, friendships, and a community that was changing rapidly by the time I got to secondary school in 1973.